I've lived in Santa Fe my whole life, long enough to know that danger rarely arrives with noise. It comes quietly, like a change in the wind. My name is Evelyn Hartwell, 71 years old, retired elementary school teacher, widow of a man who used to fix wind chimes for fun. I still wake early, keep lists, and trust people who look me in the eye. That afternoon, I walked to Elm Street Cleaners, a place that had pressed my late husband's shirts for decades. The spring air was dry and sharp. Dust lifted from the sidewalks like smoke. I carried a small grocery bag in one hand and folded between my fingers the yellow claim ticket my daughter Claire had given me that morning. "It's just my coat, Mom," she'd said, rushing out the door. "Pick it up if you have time." Inside, the familiar hiss of steam and faint scent of starch felt comforting. Mr. Alvarez, who'd run the shop since the 70s, looked up from his counter ledger. Usually he greeted me with a warm buenos dias, but this time he only stared, his mouth tightening. I laid the ticket down, picking up for Claire Hartwell. He glanced toward the door, then reached to turn the key in the lock. The click startled me. "Senora Evelyn," he said softly, "you must listen. Take your grandchildren and leave before dawn." I thought I'd misheard. "Excuse me." His hands shook as he bent behind the counter, retrieving a small plastic bag. Inside was a folded sheet of paper and something glossy. He pushed it toward me as though it burned. "This was in your daughter's coat pocket. I shouldn't keep it." The paper was a bank receipt, a transfer worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Beneath it lay a photograph of my grandchildren, Maddie and Owen, their faces circled in red marker, rough and uneven. For a moment, I couldn't feel the floor beneath me. The smell of hot fabric blurred with the rush of blood in my ears. "Mr. Alvarez whispered, "Please, go tonight." I closed my hand around the bag, its edges sharp against my palm, and stepped out into the bright, ordinary street that suddenly felt nothing like home. I don't remember walking home, only the sound of my shoes scraping against the pavement and the way the plastic bag crinkled in my trembling hand. The sun had dipped behind the hills, throwing long orange streaks across the street. My heart wouldn't slow down. I kept seeing those red circles, ugly and frantic, like warnings drawn in blood. Inside the house, everything looked painfully normal. Claire's mug in the sink, crayons scattered on the kitchen table, the smell of detergent from the morning wash. My phone buzzed on the counter, a message from her late meeting. "Mom, please feed the kids." I stared at it for a long time. The words were ordinary, but something in them felt rehearsed. I could almost hear the tension under her casual tone. My instincts, honed from decades of teaching children to trust their gut, screamed louder than logic. Something was terribly wrong. I scrolled through my contacts and pressed Rosa Vargas. She'd been my neighbor for 30 years before moving across town. A nurse who had seen everything from heartbreak to miracles. "Rosa," I whispered, "I need a ride tonight. Someone reliable. No questions." Her voice stayed calm. "I know a man who drives nights. Give me 10 minutes." I packed without thinking a few changes of clothes, water bottles, cookies, the kids' favorite stuffed bear. I moved through the house quietly, each drawer's creak sounding like an alarm. Upstairs, Maddie was asleep with a book over her chest. Owen curled beside her, clutching his toy car. I brushed hair from Maddie's forehead and said softly, "Sweetheart, we're going on an adventure. Just you and me and Owen." She blinked, confused but trusting, and nodded. Within minutes, we were outside. The night air cool and thin. A dark sedan waited at the curb, engine humming. I lifted Owen into the back seat and helped Maddie climb in beside him. As the car pulled away, our house grew smaller in the rearview mirror, its porch light glowing like a fragile star that could be swallowed by the dark at any second. By the time the lights of Santa Fe disappeared behind us, both children were fast asleep, their heads tilted toward each other. The driver, a quiet man with gray temples, kept his eyes on the road, saying nothing. The highway stretched out in silver lines, the desert breathing in shadows. I sat with the plastic bag still in my coat pocket, its edges pressing against my thigh like a reminder I couldn't escape. We stopped at a small roadside motel just before sunrise. The neon sign flickered, vacancy in red and blue, buzzing faintly in the cold air. I thanked the driver and handed him cash. He only nodded once before driving off. Tail lights swallowed by the horizon, inside the room. The sheets smelled faintly of bleach. Maddie and Owen curled up on the same bed, their breathing even. I sat in the chair by the window, staring at the faint pink line of dawn stretching over the desert hills. My husband, Daniel, used to wake before sunrise to make coffee. I could almost hear his voice again. Courage isn't noise. Evie, it's breath when you're terrified. I tried to breathe. When the children stirred, I told them we were taking a short trip into town. They followed without question, trusting the steadiness I didn't feel. I drove slowly toward St. Michael's Church, its adobe walls glowing under the new light. Father Joseph Hale stood near the entrance, his silver hair catching the sun. We'd taught at the same school decades ago. Before he answered his calling, he recognized me instantly and ushered us inside. As the children played quietly in a pew, I told him everything, Mr. Alvarez, the photo, the money. He listened without interrupting, his fingers folded. When I finished, he said, "Evelyn, there's someone you should meet." He led me to a side office, where a young woman with dark curls looked up from a stack of case files. "Amira Levin," he said. "She helps people caught in things they never saw coming." Amira extended her hand, her eyes calm but sharp. "Let's start from the beginning," she said. "Tell me about your daughter." Amira spread the papers across the small table, her laptop open beside a stack of forms and coffee rings. The motel's desk lamp flickered, throwing restless light over the bank slip that had lived in my pocket since yesterday. She slipped on a pair of reading glasses and leaned close, her finger tracing the faint red stamp at the corner. "This isn't a local transfer," she murmured. "The routing goes through a shell account in Miami, registered under something called Luma Global Holdings. That company doesn't exist anywhere legitimate." She typed quickly, the keyboard clattering like rain. Lines of data scrolled down the screen, full of numbers and codes I couldn't begin to understand. "There's a secondary signature here," she said. "Daniel Kaur." The name dropped into the silence like a stone. My stomach tightened. "Claire mentioned a Daniel once," I said quietly. "Someone from her firm. She said he handled private investments, nothing big." Amira's gaze lifted. Sharp now. "Evelyn, this man has been flagged in several federal cases. Fraud, trafficking, offshore laundering. Nothing proven yet, but it's serious." I felt my pulse in my ears. My daughter wouldn't. The words faded before they reached my tongue. Amira reached across the table. "Steady, but firm. Don't call her. Don't go home. If what we're seeing connects. She could be in danger or part of something that puts you and the kids at risk." I gripped the edge of the chair to stop my hands from shaking. Outside, a freight train passed, its horn echoing through the thin motel walls like a warning. Amira picked up her phone. "I have a contact in federal investigations, Agent Ruiz. I'll send this to him tonight. He's discreet." She turned to me once more, her voice softening. "Whatever happens, we proceed carefully. You've done the right thing bringing this to light." I nodded, but my throat felt raw. on the screen. The transfer code blinked beside that stranger's name, looping endlessly like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. By evening, I couldn't stand the waiting. Amira had begged me to stay put, but every fiber of my being ached for answers. Just a few documents. I told her over the phone. Though we both knew it was a lie, I needed to see for myself what kind of truth could destroy a family. The drive back to Santa Fe was long and colorless. Desert wind swept across the highway, carrying that dry smell of dust and regret. When I turned onto our street, the house stood still beneath the porch light, too still, as if holding its breath. Inside, everything looked exactly as I'd left it. Claire's scarf draped over a chair, Owen's sneakers by the door, a glass half full on the counter. But the air was wrong, heavy, stale, aware. I moved quietly through the rooms until I reached the study. Claire's desk was neat as always, the drawers lined with files labeled in her sharp handwriting. I knelt and pressed my palm against the carpet, feeling the slight rise where I knew the safe was hidden beneath. She'd once laughed over dinner, teasing her husband that she'd never forget the code. Who could forget their own wedding date? My fingers shook as I turned the dial 071609. A click. The door swung open. Stacks of cash sat bound in rubber bands, their edges crisp and cold. Beside them lay 3 passports, different names. Same faces. Claire, Maddie, Owen, plane tickets tucked between them. Madrid. One way. Departure this Friday. My knees gave out. I sat on the floor. The sight swimming before me. The air smelled of ink and betrayal. My daughter, my only child, had built this life on deception, brick by brick, until the house itself became a shell of lies. Tears blurred the letters as I lifted my phone and took photos with trembling hands. My breath came in shallow bursts. Then I closed the safe, locked it again, and stumbled toward the door, outside. The night had deepened. The porch light flickered once and went dark, leaving me in the silence of a home that no longer belonged to me. The safe house was nothing more than a rented bungalow on the outskirts of Albuquerque plain walls. Drawn blinds, the hum of an old refrigerator masking the tension in the air. I sat at the edge of a narrow couch, clutching a cup of coffee gone cold. Amira was beside me, tapping quietly on her laptop. Across from us stood Agent Ruiz, tall, broad-shouldered, his dark jacket creased from travel. His eyes held that weary steadiness of a man who had seen too much and trusted too little. "Ma'am," he said gently, setting a folder on the table. "We managed to recover partial data from your daughter's phone backup." Amira turned the screen toward me. Lines of text scrolled across a pale background messages, stripped of any warmth. 2 targets secured, transfer confirmed. Another read simply, "Delivery before Friday. Payment clears upon arrival." The words swam. I blinked, but they wouldn't change. Amira clicked again, revealing a folder of images my grandchildren's faces circled in that same jagged red ink, the strokes uneven, almost violent. "These circles," Ruiz said, voice steady but low, "are identification markers. Criminal rings use them to mark potential assets for movement or sale. They're coded by color and number." I pressed a hand to my mouth. My stomach twisted, the room tilted. The next thing I knew, I was kneeling beside the couch, the bitter taste of bile rising as I heaved into a wastebasket. Amira knelt beside me, holding my shoulder until the shaking eased. Ruiz spoke again, softer this time. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'm sorry, but this goes far beyond theft or fraud. We believe your daughter is working directly with Daniel Kaur. The operation crosses borders: money laundering, human trafficking. We need to trap them both. And for that, we'll need your help." I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. My heart thudded unevenly. Caught between two unbearable truths, my daughter was a criminal, and I might be the only one who could stop her. The following night, the plan was set in motion. Ruiz called it a controlled illusion, but to me, it felt like tearing a piece of my heart out and handing it to strangers. The children were moved to a secure location under federal protection, their absence disguised as a sudden disappearance. My name, my number, my address, everything erased for now. I watched from the window of the safe house as an unmarked SUV carried Maddie and Owen away, their small faces pressed to the glass, trusting that Grandma knew best. When Ruiz returned, he placed a burner phone on the table. "We need her to reach out," he said. "She'll panic first, then reveal what she knows." It didn't take long. The screen lit up with a text from Claire. "Mom, where are the kids? You're scaring me. Please answer." I couldn't breathe. My thumb hovered over the reply button before Ruiz's firm hand stopped me. Let her think she's losing control. Minutes crawled. Then another message appeared. More frantic. "They were safe this morning. What have you done?" Ruiz's tech team patched into a live feed of Claire's phone. Her voice came through the speaker, tight and shaking. "Daniel, the buyer's waiting. Without them. We're finished." The room went still. Every syllable hit me like a blade. Amira closed her eyes, muttering something under her breath. Ruiz leaned forward, his jaw set. "That's it. We have enough to move." I covered my mouth, but a sound escaped anyway, something between a sob and a gasp. My daughter's voice. So familiar. Now sounded like a stranger's. In the next room, agents began moving loading vests, radios crackling with coded words. Through the thin wall, their footsteps echoed like a heartbeat, counting down. I stood in the doorway, trembling, knowing that, by sunrise, the truth would have no shadows left to hide in, and neither would she. The van smelled of cold metal and burnt coffee. I sat between Amira and Ruiz, headphones pressed against my ears, eyes fixed on the grainy black and white feed from the motel's security camera. The clock on the dashboard glowed, 11:42 p.m. Outside, the desert wind carried the faint hum of engines positioning around the lot. Ruiz murmured into his radio, calm but sharp. "Teams Alpha and Bravo in place. Wait for my signal." I could see the motel, a row of tired doors beneath a flickering sign. Room 12. That was where Claire and Daniel Kaur had gone. Two silhouettes moved inside, pacing, arguing. Claire's outline looked smaller than I remembered, as if guilt itself had bent her. "Now," Ruiz said quietly. The next seconds unfolded in fragments, the crash of boots against concrete. A burst of shouting. Federal agents. "Hands up." The words tore through the night, followed by a scream so raw it scraped my chest open. Through the feed, I saw Claire drop to her knees, hands trembling in the light of a dozen flashlights. Daniel lunged toward the window, but was slammed down by officers. His voice drowned beneath the metallic snap of handcuffs. I could hear Claire crying through the audio line. "Please, you don't understand, Mom. I can explain." My throat locked. I pulled off the headset and turned away, pressing both hands to my face. The sound of her voice, my little girl's voice, collided with memories that would never fit again. Her first recital, her laughter over burnt pancakes, the warmth of her hand when she told me she'd found someone she loved. Outside, red and blue lights pulsed against the motel walls, painting the desert in colorless waves. Ruiz rested a hand on my shoulder, firm but not unkind. "It's over," he said. I nodded, though my heart refused to believe it. Somewhere beyond the static and sirens, my daughter was being led away in chains, and I sat in the dark, listening to the sound of a life breaking apart. 3 weeks later, I sat beneath the cold lights of Albuquerque Federal Court, hands folded in my lap. The air smelled of paper and old carpet, that sterile scent of bureaucracy that never quite covers the weight of human ruin. Rows of strangers filled the bench's reporters, clerks, a few silent onlookers curious about the story of a daughter who'd sold her soul. At the defense table sat Claire, her hair tied back, her face drawn and colorless. The sharp woman who once commanded every room now looked hollow, emptied out from the inside. Beside her, a public defender whispered something she didn't seem to hear. She never looked up when they called my name. I rose slowly and took the stand. The microphone buzzed as I adjusted it. My voice sounded foreign in that space, thin but steady. I told the truth about the dry cleaner, the bag, the safe, the tickets to Madrid, about the photo marked in red. I spoke as if each word might shatter, careful not to let the tremor in my chest spill into my voice. The prosecutor displayed the evidence on the large screen bank transfers. Emails, photos, passport copies. Each image appeared like a wound reopening. Claire didn't flinch. Her gaze stayed fixed on the table, as though looking at me might pull her apart. When the jury returned, the room fell still. The foreman stood, his tone measured, almost sorrowful. On all counts, money laundering, conspiracy to traffic minors, and obstruction of justice, the defendant is found guilty. A sound escaped Claire, more exhale than cry. Her shoulders slumped, hands limp in her lap. The judge's gavel struck once, echoing through the room like a closing door. I reached for Maddie's and Owen's hands beside me, holding them tight. They didn't understand the words, only that their mother wasn't coming home. I kept my eyes forward as they led Claire away. Her wrists bound, her steps unsteady. The world outside the courtroom was bright and merciless. Justice had spoken, but my heart felt like it had been buried in its wake. By spring, the desert had softened again. The winds no longer carried fear, but the dry scent of sage and sunlight. My new home stood at the edge of town, a small adobe house with chipped blue shutters and a roof painted the color of clay. Maddie called it the Red Roof House, her way of claiming it as ours. The children slept better now. They went to school near St. Michael's, where the bell rang each morning with a sound that felt like forgiveness. On quiet afternoons, I tended to the marigolds behind the fence, gold and orange blossoms that turned toward the sun, no matter how hard the wind blew. The earth here was stubborn, but it bloomed anyway. Inside, the walls were covered with the children's drawings. Most were bright scenes dogs, trees, a crooked sun, but one hung above the kitchen table, taped carefully in place. It showed 3 figures under a roof painted in red crayon. I'd asked Maddie once why she chose that color. She said, "Because red means safe now." That night, after they'd gone to bed, I sat at the small wooden desk by the window and opened my journal. The paper smelled faintly of ink and rain. My hand no longer trembled as I wrote, "No one will ever use red to mark their faces again. In this house, red means home." When I finished, I closed the book and watched the moon rise over the desert hills. A soft knock sounded at the door. It was Father Joseph, holding a small basket of bread from the parish. His face, weathered but kind, eased into a smile. "You've made this place beautiful, Evelyn," he said. I told him, "Thank you not for the bread, but for teaching me that courage isn't found in loud moments, but in the quiet act of staying when it hurts most." As he left, the children's laughter drifted from their room light. Unbroken, alive. The red roof above us glowed faintly under the moon, a promise that even after the worst storms, Love can still build something whole.